need you to picture this, and picture it well. The night was cold, still damp from the last rain, and the old treehouse groaned as if the wood itself had memories it wanted to release. Inside, 3 boys tried to convince themselves they were brave enough to sleep in a box nailed to a tree. The air smelled of earth and smoke, and the silence between the gusts of wind felt heavy, unnatural, like the air before a storm. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the Granny's Whisper channel, where the darkest stories come alive every night. Tell me in the comments, do you listen in complete darkness, or do you leave a small light on? And if you've ever felt watched while alone, share your story below. You may not be the only one. At first, it was laughter, whispered jokes, and half-eaten pretzels. Noah had his little CD player, one earbud hanging loose, whispering the faintest static rhythm that didn't quite drown out the night. Chase cracked jokes, too loud at times, as if speaking over the dark might keep it at bay. And me? I tried to stay awake when my turn came to keep watch. I thought it would be funny, playing soldier, guarding a plywood castle. I didn't know how long the hours of the night could stretch when the world outside turns into nothing but shadow and silence. I remember the weight of the flashlight against my knee. I remember the pale slice of the yard visible through the crooked window, the faint hum of the highway like the ocean's breath a mile away. I thought I'd stay sharp, but the truth is, night has a way of swallowing you whole. My eyes grew heavy, the beam of the flashlight drifted, and I felt myself slipping into that half-dream where everything is both real and unreal at once. Then, the jolt, that sickening drop in your stomach. The shock that wakes you as though your body knows something before your mind does. My eyes flew open, and when I looked through the glassless square of the window, I saw him. A man stood at the base of the ladder, perfectly still, head tilted back, staring up at us. No movement, no shifting weight, no sound of breath, just his face tilted toward the box in the branches where 3 kids huddled, too small to understand what patience really meant. For one fleeting second, I thought it could be Chase's grandfather, but the posture was wrong. The silence was wrong. The stillness, too deliberate, too exact. My throat locked, but I whispered for Chase. He stirred, crawled to the window, and the moment his eyes met that figure, I felt his hand clamp around my wrist so tight it left crescents in my skin. Noah rubbed his eyes, confused, and then he too leaned forward. 3 boys, 1 silent figure. "Hey," Chase called down, voice cracking, but he tried to sound casual. "Hey, sir?" No answer. The man didn't flinch, didn't even blink. Chase tried again, a little louder. "Do you need something?" "Nothing." I grabbed the flashlight, ready to shine it, but Chase shook his head sharply. No, he didn't need to explain. If we lit him up, it would mean admitting we were just kids. It would mean inviting his attention deeper, showing him exactly who we were and how trapped we were. So instead, we sat there in the dark, pretending that stillness could protect us. The minutes dragged like hours, every sound magnified, the creak of the wood under our knees, the distant dog barking, even the shallow rasp of our own breathing. My ears strained, waiting for him to shift, to cough, to shuffle. But he didn't. He only stood, watching. We whispered about the landline in the house, but none of us dared climb down. None of us dared break the fragile barrier between us and him. Somewhere in the stillness, the night began to feel endless. At one point, I shut my eyes for what I thought was a moment. When I opened them, the pale gray of dawn was creeping across the grass. I leaned forward, daring a glance. The space below was empty. But when we finally climbed down, the ground told its own story. The grass was flattened with circles, boot prints pressed into the dew. He had walked around the tree again and again through the night, orbiting, waiting, patient as stone. I want you to hold that image, the boot prints circling, the unspoken question of how long a person could stand there, silent, waiting for children who would never come down. Before we go further, let me whisper something else in your ear. If you've stumbled into Granny's whisper tonight, don't wander off. Subscribe to the channel because here, the darkest stories don't just get told, they come alive. And tell me honestly, do you listen to these stories in complete darkness? Or do you leave a small light on just in case something decides to stand quietly outside your window? Because what happened next, what happened after that morning, makes me wonder if some lights are never strong enough to keep the dark away. We tried to brush it off, you know. Kids pretending bravery is just another game. We lied to Chase's mom, said we stayed up too late, laughed too loud. She made pancakes, humming in the kitchen, and we didn't breathe a word about the man in the yard. But silence has a way of sticking to your bones. You can laugh, you can eat, you can pretend, but you never really stop feeling eyes on you. That night, I went home, but sleep didn't come easy. Every time the house settled, I thought of those damp boot prints. Every time the dog barked in the distance, I imagined him outside my window, tilted head, patient stare. And when sleep finally took me, it wasn't with peace. It was with dreams of circling footsteps and a ladder that shook, though no one climbed it. For weeks, the memory refused to fade. And then, one winter night, months later, when the snow had crusted over the yard and the air stung like knives in your lungs, I climbed into a different treehouse, not Chase's, my own, built by my father. I told myself it was safe, the kind of place kids draw maps of in notebooks. 4 walls, a hatch door, and a square little window cut by my dad's jigsaw. I kept my BB gun propped in the corner because even at 12, I thought wood and air could protect me. I brought a thermos of cocoa because warm sweetness makes you believe you're untouchable. That night, as I leaned against the wall, the sound came. Not wind, not shifting branches, but the groan of wood under weight. One step. I slid the hatch bolt in place and froze, heart hammering. Silence followed, stretching thin. I told myself it was nothing, just the cold making the wood settle. But 10 minutes later, the sound returned. This time, weight leaving. A footstep off the rung. One step up, one step down, separated by a span of waiting that made no sense. And then, breathing, above me, on the roof. Slow, steady, human. Every hair on my neck prickled as I pressed my cheek against the plywood. My BB gun was nothing but a toy. My only ally was the dog inside the house, and I could hear her barking. Not at me, but at the roof, barking, warning, growling. I opened the hatch with trembling fingers and lowered myself onto the ladder, careful not to make the same sound I had just heard. I didn't look up, I didn't dare. But when I hit the ground, the dog's gaze stayed fixed on the roof above me, ears forward, teeth bared. I wanted to believe my dad when he came outside with a flashlight, sweeping it across the treehouse, the roof, the yard. He said nothing, just the wordless hum men use when they don't want to admit they've seen something too. But the next morning in the snow, there were marks, not footprints, not tracks that told a full story, just pressure on the third rung of the ladder, smudges shaped like souls pressing down, and at the base of the tree, 2 short scraps of twine, frayed at the ends, lying half buried in the snow, as if something or someone had been tying and untying, testing. Years later, that treehouse came down, but sometimes at night, when I'm on call as a paramedic, I'll hear a creak from the rig's roof or a heavy silence outside the window of a patient's house. And I'll remember the patience, the waiting, the sense that what frightened me back then hadn't been a prank or an accident. It had been deliberate, and I can't help but wonder if I'd stayed in that treehouse longer that night, if I'd ignored the breathing above me, if I hadn't climbed down, what would have happened when that patience ran out? You might think the mind forgets. That time sands down the edges of fear until it's just another memory filed away. But the truth is, some things linger. Some things stay sharp enough to cut decades later. The next summer, after the night of breathing on the roof, I thought maybe I'd finally put it behind me. Different season, different treehouse, a different kind of silence. But treehouses, they have a way of keeping secrets. They're like cages nailed into living wood, part shelter, part trap. And no matter how innocent they look in daylight, once the sun drops, they become something else. It was July. The heat pressed down even in the evenings, the kind of summer where crickets sang so loud you almost believed they could drown out anything else. My dad and I had built a new hideout together. He called it a fortress. 4 walls of plywood, a flat roof, a cutout window. Simple. But to me, it was everything. I was 7. What did I know about shadows that stretch too long, or the way silence bends when something is standing too close? One wall had a knothole. At first, it was nothing, just the place where a branch had been cut, the wood scarred around a perfect circle. I called it my spyglass. Through that little hole, I could watch the tree line where the yard ended and the woods began. Most nights, it was just grass swaying, maybe a rabbit or 2 darting past. But the night it happened, that circle filled with something else. An eye, not an animal's, human. Close enough that the whites glistened in the sliver of moonlight, red veins threading through brown, so close it felt like the person's skin was pressed right up against the other side of the wood. It didn't blink, it didn't move, just stared back at me while my own eye locked to it. At first, confusion numbed me. Maybe a friend, maybe my dad pulling a prank, but my gut knew better. My heart slammed so hard it shook my hands before my brain even caught up. Then it blinked, slow, deliberate, and after a few seconds, the eyelids slid shut completely, like whoever was watching me had simply decided to stop for now. That's when the scream ripped out of me. I tumbled down the ladder, half slipping, skin burning as I scraped my shin on the rung. I bolted across the yard, tears stinging my eyes, yelling for my dad. He came with the rifle, practical as always, flashlight beam slicing the dark. "Where?" he asked, his voice low, sharp. "The knothole," I gasped. "The eye, it was right there." He raised the light to the wall of the treehouse, to the small round cutout that had been my spyglass. Nothing, no movement, no face retreating into the woods, just the creak of branches and the heavy silence pressing down on both of us. He searched for half an hour, circling the base of the tree, sweeping the light through grass and into the woods. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing that said a living body had been there at all. Finally, he lowered the rifle. "Eyes play tricks in the dark, son." But even as he said it, I saw the set of his jaw, the way his eyes flicked back once more to the treehouse before we went inside. He didn't believe his own words, not fully. The next day, sunlight made me bold again. I climbed back into the treehouse, telling myself I'd been wrong, that it had been a shadow, a trick of my imagination. But when I leaned close to the knothole, the wood around it wasn't the same. It had been scraped, chewed away, fresh pale grooves cut into the grain, like someone had taken a blade or a sharp stick and worked at it from the outside, enlarging it, making sure the circle was just wide enough for an eye to peer through. I called for my dad. He climbed up, looked at the raw edges of the wood, and didn't say much, just rubbed his jaw and muttered, But I saw it again, the look he thought he was hiding, that flicker of unease that told me he believed me now, at least a little. After that, nights in the treehouse were never the same. Every rustle in the woods made me flinch. Every time the wind breathed through the branches, I thought I could hear faint exhaling, the whisper of lungs too close. I never saw the eye again, not directly, but I always felt it there, just waiting for me to press my face too near, just lingering for the chance to blink at me once more. And sometimes, God help me, I thought I could hear fingernails dragging across the outside wall, just faint scratches, enough to raise goosebumps, enough to make me clench my fists so tight my nails cut into my palms. I was stubborn. I told myself I wouldn't be chased away. But fear has a way of rewriting you, of carving its marks into your bones, the way someone carved at that knothole. And though I didn't stop using the treehouse, I was never truly alone in it again. Not really. Years later, as a grown man, I find myself staring into airplane windshields at night, seeing only my reflection against black skies. I tell myself I'm safe up there, 40,000 feet above the ground. But in the silence between radio calls, when the clouds swallow the horizon and the cockpit feels too small, I remember. I remember that summer, the scrape of wood, the eye that blinked once, then closed, like it could wait as long as it needed. And I wonder if I've ever really stopped being watched, because things like that, things that lean too close, things that know where you'll be every night, they don't stop just because you grew up. They wait. They bide their time. And I think maybe, just maybe, they follow. That's why I never look too long through a window in the dark, because I know, deep down, if I lean in far enough, if I linger too long, something will be there. An eye, staring back. But the curse of treehouses doesn't stop with me. I thought it was just my story, my nightmare, until I heard about Eli and what called his name in the woods. The story threads connect like roots underground. You can't always see them, but they're there. The same silence, the same patience, the same hunger that presses close when night falls. Eli's summer began the same way mine had, a treehouse, a flashlight, and the illusion of safety. Only this time, what came for him didn't just watch, it spoke, it called. And not in some monstrous growl, not with distorted howls. No, it used the one voice guaranteed to pull him from his fortress, his mother's. Eli was 13 the summer it began for him, and though years have stretched thin since then, The way his voice trembled when he told me makes me believe he's still standing in those nights, still listening, still waiting for the call to come again. His treehouse wasn't special by design, just 4 walls and a patchwork roof his dad had built from leftover lumber. Nothing more than a fortress of plywood, but to Eli it was everything. A stage for his sketchbook superheroes, a corner of the world untouched by arguments inside the house, a place where a boy could believe he was hidden from everything that gnawed at him. But tree houses don't just hide you, they spotlight you. They lift you above the ground, put you in a frame of branches where anyone or anything can stand in the shadows and look up. The first night it happened, Eli said he was sketching by flashlight when the voice drifted out from the tree line. His name, clear as day. Eli. He thought it was his mother. Of course he did. Who else could call like that, with the exact rhythm of love and authority tangled together in 3 letters? He scrambled down, eager, clumsy, still clutching his flashlight. He burst through the back door, breathless, only to find her at the sink, rinsing dishes. "What is it?" she asked, startled, confused. "You called me." She shook her head, water dripping from her hands. "No, honey, I didn't." He swallowed the embarrassment, muttering something about imagination, about echoes. But the next night, at almost the same time, it happened again. This time, the tone was sharper, impatient. "Eli, come here." Again, he ran down the ladder. Again, his mother was inside, this time on the couch, eyes fixed on the glow of the television. She gave him a puzzled look. When he tried to explain, she brushed it off with a smile too quick, too dismissive. Voices carry in the summer. Maybe a neighbor called their kid. But it kept happening, night after night, almost like clockwork. Sometimes soft and coaxing, sometimes scolding. Always his mother's voice, always from the woods, and always when he was up there in the treehouse. Eli started testing it. He'd bring his watch, note the time. 10 o'clock, 10:05, 10:15, always within the same window. He set up a radio once, left it playing static in the treehouse while he sat inside at the kitchen window with his mother in plain sight. And sure enough, at 10 past, the call came. Eli, floating across the yard in her exact tone while she sat across from him eating a peach. That's when fear rooted in him. That's when the treehouse stopped being a fortress and became a stage lit by a flashlight beam with the boy alone inside and something in the woods playing the audience. He told me he tried shouting back one night. His courage was thin, but he didn't want to keep running anymore. So when the voice came, sharp, clipped, demanding, he called out, "What do you want?" Silence. Every muscle in his body coiled tight. He gripped the flashlight so hard it hurt, waiting for an answer. And then, just as he lowered the beam to the floor, it came, whispering this time, slow, drawn out. "Eli!" The whisper didn't come from the trees. It came from closer, from the dark just below the window frame. He dropped the flashlight, the beam spinning wild before it rolled into the corner. His throat closed. He scrambled down the ladder so fast he scraped both shins, stumbled across the yard, slammed through the door, and locked it. His parents brushed it off again. Dreams, imagination, kids spook themselves. But Eli knew better. The worst came a week later when his stubborn streak told him to face it head on. He climbed into the treehouse with his sketchbook, left the flashlight dim, and told himself he wouldn't run this time. At 10 past, the voice called. "Eli!" He gritted his teeth, refused to move. "Eli!" It came again, sharper, then silence, and then words that never should have been spoken. "I see you in the window." He froze, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The air itself seemed to curdle, heavy, pressing down. Something was close, close enough to see him, to know where he sat in the dark. He bolted again, scraping skin, nearly falling. His father stormed out with a bat, checked the yard, shouted into the woods. Nothing, no footprints, no figures. Just silence and the neighbor's dog barking like it had been roused from some deeper instinct. That was the night Eli stopped using the treehouse at night. Daylight made it harmless again. A wooden box in the branches, laughter and warmth. But as soon as the sun dipped, he shut the curtains, turned his back on it, and let it rot in darkness. Years later, he still flinches when someone calls his name in the dark. Because voices lie, they twist, and sometimes what speaks isn't speaking to you. It's speaking through you, trying to drag you closer. And what haunts me is that line, that impossible sentence whispered through the black. "I see you in the window." I don't know what would have happened if Eli had stayed, if he hadn't run that night. But I do know this: whatever called him knew his name, knew his mother's voice, knew exactly where he was. That kind of knowledge doesn't come from neighbors. It comes from watching. And tree houses, they give you nowhere to hide. But Eli's story wasn't the end either, because the curse isn't bound to one boy, one summer, one voice. It stretches further, winding its way through families, children, laughter that turns brittle, and playhouses that hide something waiting for nightfall. Missoula, Montana, 2000. A little girl named Lily, 6 years old. She loved the treehouse in the backyard of the house her mother had just bought. Weathered boards, a crooked ladder nailed to the trunk, sunlight dappling through the roof. To a child, it was a castle. To her mother, it was harmless. But Lily wasn't alone up there. Not really. At first, it was innocent. Dolls, songs, the chatter of a child's imagination. But when her mother called her in, Lily would yell back, "I can't leave yet. He's still here." Her mother assumed she meant a doll, an imaginary friend. And when she asked Lily who he was, the girl only said, "My friend. He lives in the treehouse. He doesn't like adults, so he hides when you come." It was easy to laugh at then, easy to dismiss. Children make rules for invisible friends all the time. But that laughter dried up when Lily began begging to sleep outside. "He gets lonely at night. He wants me to stay." And then came the drawings. Stick figures of Lily, her mother, the family dog, and one more. A tall figure labeled only him. No face, just a blank oval where the features should have been. When her mother asked why she hadn't drawn his face, Lily shrugged. "He doesn't want me to." That's when the unease turned to fear, because children may invent friends. But children don't invent the sound of heavy footsteps scampering across floorboards when they're supposed to be asleep. Children don't invent the feeling of something shifting just behind them when their mothers climb the ladder and scoop them up in panic. And children don't invent footprints too large to be their own pressed into the dust of the boards. But that's Lily's story, and it's waiting for you, because the night her mother carried her down, too afraid to turn and look at what moved across the wood behind her, something else stayed in the treehouse. And if you listen closely, you can still hear it pacing, waiting. Her mother never forgot the sound of footsteps that night, the way they scuttled across the planks just as she reached for her daughter, the vibration that traveled through the wood into her hands as if something else was crouched there, heavier than a 6-year-old could ever be. She didn't turn, didn't dare. She carried Lily down the ladder, heart pounding, the flashlight beam shaking, the night pressing tight around them. Inside, she locked every door, pulled every curtain, and held her daughter until dawn bled gray across the sky. At breakfast, Lily's eyes were heavy, but not from sleep. She looked hurt, betrayed, when she said, "You shouldn't have taken me away. He wasn't finished talking to me." Her mother's spoon froze against the bowl. She asked carefully, "What did he say?" Lily poked at her cereal, her little voice almost shy. "He said you wouldn't understand, that you'd take me away, and you did." Her mother wanted to laugh it off, to reassure, but something inside her twisted cold. She pushed the bowl away, tried to distract Lily with cartoons, but her own thoughts circled back again and again to the sound of boards creaking under someone else's weight. That afternoon, she went out alone. Sunlight scattered across the yard, the air smelled of warm pine, and everything looked ordinary. The ladder rungs were just wood, the treehouse just planks nailed together. But when she stepped inside, the dust on the floor wasn't ordinary at all. Footprints, too long, too wide, crossing in patterns around the space, not Lily's. She crouched low, her breath shaky, and saw something else tucked near the corner, a drawing, one Lily hadn't shown her. It was crumpled, torn at the edge, the crayon strokes frantic, the same faceless figure, arms longer now, reaching toward a smaller stick figure curled in the corner. Her hand shook as she crushed the paper and shoved it into her pocket. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard those footsteps again, quick, light, not a child's play, but something restless, circling. The days passed, but Lily's obsession deepened. She begged to go outside, whined when the curtains were drawn, sulked when her mother said no. "He misses me," she whispered once, clutching her doll so tight the plastic arm bent. "He says I should stay with him forever." Her mother's patience snapped. "Enough, he isn't real." But Lily's face hardened, far too old for her years. "He's more real than you." That was the moment her mother knew. This wasn't just imagination. Something had rooted itself in her child, something patient, something clever enough to hide behind the innocence of games. One night near the end of July, she caught Lily slipping out of bed, bare feet padding across the hall, flashlight clenched in one hand. The window was open, and the pale glow from the treehouse flickered in the dark. She rushed outside barefoot, grass wet against her ankles. The ladder creaked as she climbed, panic clamping her chest. She whispered her daughter's name, but the sound seemed swallowed by the branches. When she reached the opening, Lily was curled in a ball against the wall, eyes closed, breathing deep. Asleep. The flashlight rolled slowly across the floor, but the sound came again, the shuffle of steps across boards, circling them, quick, deliberate, too heavy to be a dream. Her mother grabbed her, lifted her small body against her chest, and in that instant she felt the board shift behind her, not sagging, not breaking, pressing down, like hands or knees, or something crawling closer. She didn't turn. She didn't want to see what kind of face belonged to the long, faceless figure in the drawings. She climbed down, step after trembling step, the boards above groaning as if something followed to the edge. When her feet hit the ground, she ran, inside, locks turned, curtains shut. She didn't breathe until the sun broke the horizon. The next morning, she didn't hesitate. The treehouse came down, board by board, ladders split, nails twisted out and tossed away. Lily screamed, sobbed, begged her to stop, but her mother kept going until all that remained was an empty patch of dirt beneath the cottonwoods. The nights grew quieter after that. Lily stopped mentioning her friend, stopped drawing faceless figures, stopped begging to sleep outside. Childhood memories blurred as years piled on, and by adulthood she laughed when her mother tried to remind her. "I was just a kid," she said. "I must have made it up." But her mother never forgot. Not the footprints, not the drawings, not the scurrying weights circling them in the dark, and certainly not the cold certainty that if she had turned around, if she had looked over her shoulder in that treehouse, she would have seen something crouched close, something that had been waiting patiently for her daughter to stay the night. Sometimes, even decades later, when she passes a playground fort or sees a child waving from the window of a backyard treehouse, her chest tightens. The wood looks harmless, but she knows. She knows what hides when the sun goes down. And if you lean close, if you press your ear to those old planks, sometimes you can still hear it, pacing, waiting, whispering without a mouth, because the faceless aren't blind. They only hide until you look too long. You'd think by now the curse of treehouses would be clear, but it doesn't end with footsteps and whispers. It mutates. It bends itself into new shapes, waiting for whoever climbs up next. There was a boy in Indiana who thought he was safe because it had been years since anyone mentioned the man at the ladder. By then, he was 17, almost grown, restless with 2 friends and too much night ahead of them. They called it camping when they hauled snacks and sleeping bags into that sagging treehouse behind Chase's grandparents' place. They thought they were daring fate, testing courage, laughing at old stories, but you don't laugh at something that waits. At first it was harmless. Pretzels crunched. Noah's CD player whispered tinny music into the dark. Chase cracked jokes, leaning half out the crooked window to narrate the neighborhood like he was some late-night radio host. A dog barked. A moth smacked the wall. A porch light went out across the road. Ordinary things, ordinary night. They set a watch, half as a joke, cards scribbled on an envelope, names in pencil, and by chance or fate, it was my turn past midnight. I sat at the window, flashlight by my knee, staring into the dark yard, pretending I was awake. But sometime after 2, my head drooped, sleep pressed down heavy, and when I jerked awake, my stomach dropped because someone was there. At the base of the ladder, a man, still as stone, his face tilted back, eyes locked on the wooden box above. I froze, throat dry. For a moment, I told myself it had to be Chase's grandfather, back early from the fish fry. But the silence was wrong. He didn't call up. He didn't shift his weight. He didn't cough or clear his throat. He only stared, hands loose at his sides. Chase crawled over, followed my gaze, and his grip clamped around my wrist. He didn't even realize he was squeezing me that hard. Noah stumbled forward too, rubbing his eyes. 3 boys now, peering down through shadows. "Hey," Chase called. "Sir?" No answer. He tried again, voice cracking. "Do you need something?" The man didn't move. I reached for the flashlight, but Chase shook his head violently. "No," because shining light meant admitting. admitting we were just kids, admitting we were trapped. So we stayed in the dark. The silence stretched, minutes dragged. Every creak of the tree felt louder. Every gust of wind against the walls made the plywood shiver like breath. The man never shifted. He didn't fidget. He didn't so much as twitch. He just waited. When the first pale streaks of dawn touched the sky, we dared to breathe. We peeked down, and he was gone. Relief hit, quick and hollow. But when we finally climbed down, careful, quiet, the ground told its own truth. Boot prints in the dew, circles around the tree, not just standing, orbiting, again and again through the night. He hadn't been frozen at all. He'd been pacing, watching. Testing the treehouse like a lion circles prey. We never spoke of it to Chase's mother. We lied, said we checked in, said nothing strange had happened, because some truths stick in the throat. Some truths are safer unspoken, but silence doesn't erase it. That man never tried to climb, never tried to speak, and yet his patience was more terrifying than any violence could have been, because sometimes the worst thing isn't what someone does. It's how long they're willing to stand there waiting for you. Even now, decades later, when I close my eyes, I hear it, the shuffle of boots circling, the stillness that pressed like a hand over our mouths, and I wonder what would have happened if one of us had dared climb down that night. Would he have stepped aside to let us pass, or was he waiting for one of us to be foolish enough to offer ourselves up? Treehouses draw them, the watchers, the imitators, the faceless. They don't all take the same shape, but the pattern repeats. Boards nailed into branches, kids inside thinking they've built something safe, and outside, something patient, something curious, something hungry. Lily's friend, Eli's mother's voice, the eye at the knothole, the man circling below. They're not separate stories. They're roots of the same tree. And when you hear enough of them, when you speak them out loud, you start to realize the tree isn't bound to one yard or one family. It stretches, unseen, beneath us all. The branches are everywhere, and maybe, just maybe, one of them is in your yard too. The summer air in Montana carried the kind of silence that fools you into thinking you're safe. Crickets sang, the cottonwoods swayed, and from the kitchen window, the treehouse looked like nothing more than a child's plaything, a harmless structure left behind by another family. Lily's mother told herself that lie more times than she could count. But lies rot when the boards creak under weight that shouldn't be there. She had torn the treehouse down, yes, piece by piece, the wood hauled to the dump, the ladder split into firewood. Lily wept, begged, screamed, but the mother held fast, convinced that destruction would end it, that without walls, without a roof, whatever had crawled into her daughter's trust would be homeless. But the truth is, some things don't live in the wood. They live in the child who heard them first. The first week after, Lily was restless. She paced the hallway at night, muttering that she couldn't hear him anymore, that he was calling faint but far away, that she needed to be closer. Her drawings didn't stop either. The blank-faced figure appeared again, now smaller, crouched in the corners of rooms she had never drawn before. Her own bedroom, the kitchen, the hallway outside her mother's door. And sometimes, when her mother bent to pick up the drawings, she swore the paper was still warm, as if the crayon had just been pressed down hard by someone other than Lily. One night, weeks later, Lily's mother woke to the sound of soft knocking. 3 raps measured against the back door. She slipped from bed, heart already racing, and checked. Nothing. The yard was empty. The cottonwoods swayed in silence. She turned back down the hall and froze. Lily was standing in her doorway, wide awake, her eyes locked on her mother's face, unblinking. "Did you hear it?" the girl asked. Her mother nodded, throat dry. "The knocking." Lily's lips twitched into a strange smile, too thin, too old. He found another place to live. Her mother rushed forward, scooped her up, carried her back to bed. But as she laid Lily down, she felt the boards underfoot give the faintest groan. Not the house shifting, not pipes, the distinct sound of weight settling on wood above. The ceiling. She forced herself not to look up. That night, she didn't sleep. The knocking came again at 3 a.m, this time from the front door. When she checked, it was empty again. But as she turned, she caught sight of Lily in the hall mirror, standing behind her though she hadn't heard her approach. The girl whispered, "He likes when you're afraid." The next morning, Lily acted as though nothing had happened. She ate her cereal, asked for cartoons, hummed while coloring. But every so often, her gaze would flick up to the ceiling, and she'd smile faintly, as though sharing a joke with someone her mother couldn't see. The mother considered moving, selling the house, fleeing. But fear sticks like tar. You convince yourself running won't help, that whatever it is will follow, that roots run deeper than property lines. And then came the night she couldn't deny it anymore. It was August, the air heavy, the house too quiet. She woke to hear Lily whispering in her room, the murmur of words too low to make out. At first, she thought it was play, but as she leaned against the doorframe, listening, she realized there were 2 voices, Lily's and another, lower, rougher, speaking in rhythm with her like a duet. Her stomach clenched. She pushed the door open, flicked on the light. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, dolls scattered, crayon in hand. She looked up, blinking slowly, as if the light itself was an interruption. "Mommy," she said softly, "you scared him away." Her mother searched the corners, the closet, under the bed. Nothing, just shadows, but the air smelled wrong, sharp and metallic, like iron nails left to rust. She grabbed Lily, tucked her into bed, turned the light back off, and whispered to herself that it was over. But she knew she'd heard 2 voices. The days blurred into autumn, and Lily stopped speaking of her friend. The drawings stopped too. Her laughter returned, light and unburdened. And the mother told herself the worst had passed. But even now, decades later, when Lily is grown, her mother avoids treehouses. She won't let her grandchildren climb them. She won't walk under their shadows, because some nights, even in her own quiet bedroom, she still wakes to the sound of soft steps circling above her, pacing boards that aren't there anymore. The curse doesn't need the treehouse to survive. The treehouse is just the doorway. Once it's opened, something steps through. And once it knows your name, once it's heard your laughter in the branches, it never really leaves. And that's why the next story matters. Because the boy in Wyoming thought the danger was gone when the summer ended. But sometimes the eye doesn't blink from outside the knothole. Sometimes it presses its face to the glass of your life forever. The cottonwoods in Wyoming always whispered at night. That was what his father said. Just branches talking to each other, wind weaving through leaves. But when you're a child sitting alone in a treehouse with only a flashlight and your imagination, the whispers don't sound like trees. They sound like someone breathing, waiting, just outside the walls. The boy was 7 that summer in 1995, proud of the fortress he and his father had built. 4 plywood walls, a flat roof, a cutout window, and one small knothole in the wood where a branch had been cut through. The knot had popped out clean, leaving a perfect circle. He called it his spyglass. From there, he could watch the long grass swaying, the rabbits darting, the woods stretching dark at the edge of the yard. He thought he was the one watching. He didn't know the truth yet, that the hole had been made for watching him. It happened just as the sun dropped, sky bruising purple. He leaned into the knothole, expecting rabbits, shadows, maybe the glint of fireflies. Instead, the circle filled with an eye, brown, veined with red. Human. So close the lashes brushed against the rim of the hole. At first he froze. His child's brain couldn't compute it. Maybe dad, maybe a friend playing a trick. But then the eyelid closed, slow and deliberate, as though whoever was out there had simply decided to rest. That's when the scream tore through him. He scrambled down the ladder, half sliding, knees scraping raw, and ran into the house, shrieking for his father. The man didn't hesitate. He grabbed the rifle, practical and heavy, and stepped into the yard, sweeping a flashlight beam across the tree line. "Where?" he asked. "The spyglass," the boy panted. "The hole, it was looking at me." His father aimed the light up toward the walls of the treehouse. Nothing, just plywood and branches shifting. He circled the yard, searched the grass for tracks. No footprints, no broken stems, just silence stretching too wide. Finally, he lowered the rifle. "Eyes play tricks in the dark, son." But his jaw was tight. His eyes lingered on the treehouse longer than they should have. The next day, in daylight, the boy climbed back inside, clutching his courage like a weapon. He leaned to the knothole again, and his stomach dropped. The edges weren't smooth anymore. The wood had been carved away, slashed with raw, pale cuts, as though someone had worked at it with a knife. From the outside, enlarging it, making sure their eye would fit perfectly. He called for his father. The man climbed the ladder, crouched low, and saw it too. He didn't say much, just rubbed his jaw, muttered something under his breath, and climbed down. The boy should have stopped using the treehouse, but he didn't. Stubbornness runs deep in children. He told himself he wouldn't be chased out of his own place, but the nights were never the same. Every creak of the boards felt like someone shifting weight. Every rustle of branches felt like a breath. And sometimes, leaning too close to the hole, he swore he could hear faint exhaling on the other side. He never saw the eye again, but he knew it waited, just beyond the thin slice of wood, patient, unblinking, waiting for him to come close enough to meet it. Years later, he grew into a man who spent nights in the cockpit of planes, 40,000 feet in the air, storms flashing outside. But even there, in the safety of steel and glass, he caught himself staring at the reflection in the windshield, wondering if something stared back, hidden just beyond, pressing close, waiting for the moment he leaned too near. Because the truth had burned itself into him that summer. He wasn't the one watching. He was the one being watched, and the treehouse had only made it easier. He told me this with a shake in his voice, though he tried to cover it with a smile. But it was the same smile Eli's mother wore, the same silence Lily's mother carried, the same tightness in my own chest when I think of boot prints circling a ladder in the dew. different towns, different years, different children, the same watchers, the same patience, the same curse nailed into boards and branches. Do you see the pattern yet? They don't break down doors. They don't smash windows. They don't need to. They just wait. They wait until you lean too close, until you believe the hole is yours to look through, until you think the voice belongs to someone who loves you. And then you understand it's not your fortress, it's theirs. And if you've built one in your yard, if you've let your child climb up into its shadow, then you've already opened the door. Because some nights when the air is still and the moonlight spills across the grass, you might find yourself looking up at the treehouse window. And if you see someone there, still, silent, watching, you'll never know if it's your child playing inside or something else wearing their patience. I was 20 when I first began to connect the threads, when the stories stopped sounding like coincidences and started feeling like roots from the same tree winding beneath the different lives. The paramedic shifts were long, the hours stretched with silence, and in those silences I thought of them. Eli with the voice of his mother calling from the woods, the boy in Wyoming staring into the knothole, Lily whispering to her faceless friend, and the man who circled our treehouse until dawn. I wanted to believe these stories were separate. I wanted to believe we'd each carried our own private nightmares, but the echoes wouldn't let me. They overlapped too neatly. The patience, the watching, the way the dark slipped into a child's trust and carved itself a place. And then came another. This one wasn't mine, not directly. It belonged to a neighbor, a woman who moved into an old house on the edge of town with her daughter. Missoula, Montana, summer of 2000. She thought the treehouse in the backyard was a blessing, a little gift left behind by the previous family. To her daughter Lily, it was a castle. But to the thing that waited, it was just another doorway. By the time I heard the story, the treehouse was long gone, but her words painted it back into existence. The ladder nailed into the trunk, the slanted roof, the laughter of a 6-year-old drifting across the yard, and then the change, the refusal to come in when called, the insistence that he's still here, the drawings, the faceless figure labeled only him, the footsteps across the boards at night, the mother carrying her daughter down, feeling the vibration of something else shifting just behind her. I couldn't shake the detail that gutted me most. When she asked why Lily never drew his face, the child's simple reply, "He doesn't want me to." I thought of the knothole carved wider, of the man pacing under our ladder, of Eli's voice breaking as he told me how the woods whispered, "I see you in the window." The curse didn't need a shape, it only needed attention. Children gave it freely. Adults gave it only when it was too late. That night, alone in my apartment after a double shift, I sat in silence. The building groaned around me, pipes knocked faintly in the walls, and somewhere above I swore I heard the creak of weight shifting on the roof. I told myself it was nothing, just the building, just age. But when I closed my eyes, I saw them all. Lily clutching her dolls, Eli's white face in the flashlight beam, the boy pressing his eye to the spyglass, me with the flashlight trembling against my knee. Different years, different states, same story. And then I realized something else. Treehouses rot, they collapse, they get torn down, but what lives in them doesn't. It lingers, it waits for another child, another window, another spyglass, another voice to mimic. You don't need a treehouse in your yard to be haunted. all you need is wood nailed together above the ground, a box where a child laughs alone, a place where night can crouch just beyond the boards. And maybe, if you think back, you'll remember it too. The sound of steps on a ladder when no one was there, the silence stretching too long, the feeling of being watched through a window you thought was safe. Because once you've heard enough of these stories, once you've traced their lines like scars across a map, you stop wondering if they're true. You start wondering when your turn will come. And if tonight, when you close your eyes, you hear something pacing across your roof, don't mistake it for the house settling. It's just patience, and patience never leaves empty-handed. You might think patience runs out, that whatever waits outside eventually tires and drifts off. But patience is exactly what makes it terrifying. It doesn't rush, it doesn't stumble, it doesn't need to. It just waits until the night is long enough, until the silence is deep enough, until you're tired enough to lean too close or to listen when you shouldn't. That's what I think about most when I replay the stories. The silence, the stillness. How many times children tried to ignore it, how many times parents dismissed it until something deeper pressed through. I still remember the last call that tied it all together for me. Not a call for blood or broken bones. A welfare check, routine on paper, an elderly woman living alone, neighbors hadn't seen her for days. We arrived to a sagging house on the edge of town, shutters loose, porch sagging. The inside smelled of dust and damp, like wood left too long in the rain. She was there, sitting upright in her chair, eyes glassy, lips slightly parted. Gone, peaceful almost. But the room told another story. Her table was covered in papers, yellow drawings done in a child's hand, stick figures, trees, boxes nailed high in branches, and in every picture the same figure loomed taller than the rest. Faceless, arms long enough to reach across the page. My partner muttered something about dementia, about old people clinging to childhood memories. But when I picked up one of the papers, I saw words scrawled in pencil at the bottom in a shaky adult's hand. He's still here. The others said the same, over and over. He's still here. He's still here. We cleared the call, left the coroner to do their job, but when I stepped back onto the porch, I glanced toward the yard. There, nailed to the trunk of a gnarled oak, were the rotted remnants of a ladder, broken rungs clinging like teeth. The boards of a treehouse long since fallen lay scattered in weeds, half buried in earth. I couldn't tell how long ago it had collapsed, decades maybe. But when the wind blew, the grass bent just enough to show deep impressions in the dirt, circles, as if someone had walked and walked and walked around the base until the ground itself remembered. That night I dreamed of the ladder, not the one from my childhood, not the one from Chase's yard, not the one Lily climbed, not the one Eli scrambled down. A different ladder, broken, splintered, and yet, as I dreamed, I heard the weight of a foot press down on it. One step, pause, one step back down, and above me, the breathing, slow, heavy, patient. I woke slick with sweat, every nerve alive, staring at the ceiling as if the boards above might groan under someone's weight. The next day, I drove back to the old woman's house. It was empty, taped off, waiting for the realtor to reclaim it. The yard was still. But as I stood by that gnarled oak, looking at the ladder stubs, I swear I heard it again. The faint sound of wood flexing, just enough to make my stomach knot. I didn't stay long, But when I turned to go, I caught movement in the corner of my eye. The window of the house, second floor, a pale oval face pressed against the glass. No features, no eyes, no mouth, just blank. And then it leaned back, swallowed by the dark. I don't know if it was memory or guilt or something older, watching through every story, every child, every board nailed to a tree. But I do know this. Once you've been inside a treehouse at night, you never really leave it. The wood might rot, the ladders might break, the voices might fade, but the watcher remains. And sometimes, when you've grown old enough to think you've escaped it, you'll look out your own window at night and find it looking back. I don't tell this part often because speaking it out loud feels like inviting it closer. But if you followed me this far through the nights of circling boot prints, the eye at the knothole, the mother's voice in the woods, the faceless friend in the drawings, then you deserve to hear how it ends, or how it never really ends. The last time I saw it was years after the old woman's house, after the drawing scrawled with, "He's still here." I had almost convinced myself I'd imagined the blank face in the window. Almost. Until one call took me back to Bloomington, the same town where we'd once dared to sleep in Chase's treehouse. It was routine. A young couple had a son, 9 years old, shaken by something he wouldn't explain. They said he'd woken screaming, refused to sleep in his room, claimed someone kept calling his name from the backyard. They wanted him checked, thought maybe it was night terrors. The boy wouldn't speak at first, just clutched his knees and stared at me with wide, wet eyes. His parents hovered, worried, embarrassed. I crouched low, gentle, told him I knew what it was like to hear voices in the dark. That's when he whispered it. "It sounds like my mom, but it's not." The words cut through me. My skin crawled. I asked where it came from. He lifted a trembling finger toward the window. I followed his gaze. Out back, nailed to a tree at the yard's edge, was a crooked ladder. Weathered boards forming a box above, a treehouse. The father laughed nervously. "It came with the house. Kid loves it in the daytime, just not at night." The boy shook his head violently. "No, not at night. He says I should stay with him forever." The mother hushed him, tried to smile, but her hand trembled where it gripped his shoulder. I excused myself, stepped outside. The air was cold, still, thick with the smell of damp leaves. I walked toward the treehouse, each step heavy. The boards above sagged, nails rusted, the ladder groaning under its own weight. I stood at the base, tilting my head back. And for the first time since that night in Chase's yard, I felt it again. That certainty of being watched. I didn't climb. I didn't call out. I only listened. And from above, faint, almost like breath pressed through cracks in the wood, I heard it. My name. Not the boy's. Not his parents'. Mine. The voice was low, rasping, but it carried the same patience I remembered. The same stillness, the same hunger that doesn't fade with years, only grows quieter, waiting. I stepped back slowly, refusing to look up again. The boy's words echoed inside me. He says I should stay with him forever. Back inside, I told the parents to keep him out of the treehouse at night. I told them to board it up, tear it down, whatever it took. They laughed nervously, thanked me, promised they would. But in their eyes, I saw doubt. People never believe until it's too late. I left that house knowing the truth I'd carried since I was 17. The treehouses aren't safe. They never were. They're doors. And once you've opened a door, you can't decide who steps through. I'm older now. I've seen blood on asphalt, bodies broken by steel and glass, families shattered by accidents that happen in a blink. But none of it unsettles me the way the silence does. The silence of someone or something standing just outside, staring up, patient as stone. So tonight, when you lay your head down, think of this. Think of the laughter of children drifting through branches, the creak of nails under weight, the soft call of your name from the dark. And when you hear it, and you will, don't answer. Don't lean too close. Don't climb down. Don't go looking, because it's already looking at you, and it's willing to wait forever.